We talked about a little bit of your struggles when you first got to college, but that went away. You had an incredible junior year, and you were the guy out of the pen for us in the biggest situations, and I think that was key, right? It wasn't this that like you were good and everybody could look at your numbers and say, oh, he had a great year. It was like, no, you were pitching in the biggest spots that year. It ended up getting you a chance to play. Got drafted in the 15th round by the Red Sox and got a chance to play. Talk about now this, kind of retransformation into being healthy, playing again, performing at a high level, and then that transition into pro ball.
Yeah, yeah, I think I got to that point it was kind of reminiscent almost of high school in a sense where, I'd played 3 years, I'd been there at 3 years at Cal, and I hadn't done much. And I'll talk. That's too what's crazy about this transfer portal stuff too, and it kind of drives me crazy. There's I had this sense of loyalty to Northern California, right? Like being at Cal, I'm on these Northern California teams. There's no other team that has California on their chest without something after it than where we're from. You know what I mean? That's who I wanted to play for. And now, I faced all this adversity in my first 3 years. Now you see people transferring all the time now instead of overcoming it, right? And I think that's one of my proudest moments of my life before all this stuff about how I overcame that. And then I started, I had this moment to myself where I just knew like, hey, I didn't come here for school. I didn't come here to do this. I didn't come here. I came here to play baseball. I haven't played. I've underperformed. I've had all this wasted potential. I haven't really done anything. And so I changed my mindset to discipline. I started to train my body, seeking outside things, doing everything I can to be healthy and to get back on the field. And chance had it where I was going to be our Sunday starter at the beginning of the year, and then I had that outing before the season. I got raked, at inter squad. I hadn't been raked. I was dealing the whole time as a starter, and I got raked. Gave up like 8 runs, and then coach started somebody else on Sunday. But then I came out of the bullpen, and just pissed off, right? Just pissed off because that was my start, and I came out of the bullpen and shoved, and I just kept shoving and shoving in bullpen situations, and I just used that fuel, that anger from being snubbed again, and then I became in all these then I just learned to love being a reliever. It fit me so well because all I was trying to do is strike everybody out anyway, because I just felt like, because in my mind my identity was like, I have to dominate you. I have to show you that I'm better than you, and what better way than that is to strike you out, which is incredibly selfish because, as a pitcher, you want to pitch to weak contact to get your teammate involved. You want to throw less pitches to keep your other players fresh. And that's just the way that I am. I'm selfish in the sense that I just want to strike everybody out. And that's why being in that role that satisfied me a lot. And yeah, that was, I think there was only 11 games which I didn't warm up or pitch in that year.
I believe it.
Yeah, it was the most important part of every game, and I love that. I love that fit my narrative. That fit the tension, and I was a little crazy sometimes, but I like that, yeah. I mean, it was,
Got you
but
back
then
to the prove them wrong, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. So then I got drafted out of nowhere, and that's the beauty. I think another beauty about playing at a big program is that they weren't there to see me in the inter squads and stuff like that. The scouts were there to see somebody else, and then they just saw me how hard I worked, and then all of a sudden now I'm on their radar. And then when that happened, and then I get drafted, then I'm like, all right, there's that sense of, okay, that sense of worth. And I think one of those big, I write about this in my book in pretty detail, was that, I don't know if you remember that Arizona State game which I pitched, where I had gotten into some trouble. I got suspended for a few games, and then I had that pickoff thing in Stanford. I don't know if you remember that, but I ended up having to pick off like 11 times in a row or something. I got pissed, and I had like the worst game of my life. And then it was Stanford. I mean, then it was Arizona State that next week, and they were top like 2 in the country at the time.
Yeah.
With Pat Murphy and them. And then that Friday night I got snubbed in the most important part of the game against this team. I got snubbed to go in in the 7th inning. They put somebody else in, and I was so pissed off, and I was on a bunch of Adderall. I was so just in a rage, and I went out there and I just absolutely lit them up, and I was just mouthing f you to all of them, and they thought I wanted to fight them, but it wasn't about them. It was about me, right? It was about This was I'd been here 4 years. I earned this. This was my spot. And how dare you not put me in? It was just such a selfish, crazy thing to think. And then that Sunday, I come in the third inning and we're down 3-0 and I end up almost pitching the whole game, and I remember this is I hadn't given up a hit. I'm just dominating it all the way into the eighth inning, I got a runner on second. I threw a couple balls, and then all of a sudden, the head coach comes out, when the head coach comes out, it's a pitching change, right? And
Yeah.
I'm like, what are you doing? I haven't given up a hit. You're gonna take me out of this game? I'm thinking to myself, what are you doing? And then he comes to me and goes, hey, Big Gary, if I take you out of this game, we're gonna lose. And that whole game, I had been pitching with a chip on my shoulder. The whole game, I had been ignoring the pain in my shoulder. I had been ignoring the cramp in my hamstring. I had been ignoring all these things, and I was just so determined to prove myself again. And then when I heard that, you know, it didn't have the motivation I think that he thought that it would help me in. It almost gave me an oversensing self of calm, because it was finally that moment where I was just that showed me like my worth from outside. You know what I mean? And then I gripped the ball a little. I started to question the pitch, for the first time. Question this for the first time that day, and I just felt a little bit relaxed. And I threw a change up, and first one I left up in the zone, and I gave up my first hit, scored the run. And so, but it was that the fact that that's what loosened me up was just hearing that just shows you how superficial it was, because that's all I wanted was just you to tell me that that what I did was worth something. And I think then once I got drafted, and I didn't get drafted as high as I thought I was going to be or should have been, and I kind of took that spark in with me a little bit. But at that point, I had an addiction now to Adderall that I didn't know a lot about, and I think that really hindered me, because when you go to pro ball, games are at night, and I'm pitching in the later innings, and I'm taking amphetamines at nighttime, and I can't sleep. And so I found out, if I go out to the bars and drink, I can pass out eventually, and I think that really hurt me and my reputation early on. And then I had a pretty good rookie year actually, numbers wise. I pitched well, but I started to build that reputation. And when I came back the next year, I met with my doctors, got on a different prescription, and I was throwing better than I ever had been. I was, mid 90s, just dominating. My mindset was good. I was just got put in double A on spring training. I was just dealing. And that's when I threw a pitch later on, and I felt a pop in my elbow. And then I knew something was wrong, but you learn early on, as a rookie, that you don't want to complain about arm injuries, because they put you at the bottom of the depth chart. It takes a long time to get back up. You only want to complain literally when you can't throw. And so I learned that early on, and so I tried to throw through it a little bit, and it got to a point where I couldn't throw, and I ended up getting surgery that was ultimately unsuccessful. But I used to blame the Red Sox for a long time for that. That not taking so long to give me my surgery, or keeping me down there all year trying to throw and rehab because they didn't want to give it to me, and then for ruining my arm basically. When the reality was, when I got hurt and I was doing my rehab, I was so miserable because I couldn't get that validation on the field, that I was going out and drinking and abusing my medication when I should have been focusing on my arm. So it was ultimately my fault that ruined it. But then when I came back the next year, my arm just wasn't right. I was throwing like 84, and they just, even though I dealt, you know what I mean, because I had really good stuff, I still dealt, but I'm throwing 84, and they said they just didn't have the innings for me. So, but and yeah, and that's when I really was lost for the first time without it. I didn't have
Mm.
that north. I didn't have that North Star. I didn't have that sense of purpose. I wasn't on a team. For the first time in my life, I wasn't a part of a team, and I didn't know what to do. And what I wanted to do, Brett, honestly, what I wanted to do was just to be alone and not think about it,
Mhm.
because I had made it a point my whole life that everybody knew me for baseball. No matter where I went, you knew, how's baseball going? How's this going? Which is understandable. I rubbed it in your face. And the last thing that I wanted to do now was talk about baseball. And what works for that. What works for that is painkillers, OxyContin, and that's what I turned to at the time, because that helped me not think, and it helped me just be alone and feel okay when I didn't feel okay.
So that transition obviously to no more baseball led you down a tough path. Um, you got dealt another shitty hand in getting a brain tumor.
But yeah.
So talk a little bit about the next piece of like, oh, you're already on a kind of downward spiral, and then you add this to the mix.
Yeah, yeah. After I got into that, I think yeah, eventually I went to Oxycontin addiction, then I eventually got into a point where it got to heroin and got to really I went to treatment, and then I got out of treatment and I started to experience these debilitating headaches. And I'm really summarizing it. But then I was diagnosed with a medulloblastoma brain tumor, slightly smaller than a tennis ball in my cerebellum, which is the voluntary movement part of your brain. That's why I still have issues with it when I speak now, because how I respond and cognitively talk, and I still have a bunch of side effects. But I had to get multiple brain surgeries, uh, intense chemotherapy, radiation. They had like I always say this all the time. They had to build a special cage, that bolted my head down as the radiation blasted me. Lost all my hair, 60 plus pounds. Uh, yeah, just had yellow tints around my skin. You couldn't. I was unrecognizable, and I wasn't. I just had such a big ego and pride. I wasn't one of those people to like announce my problems. I kind of hid and I turned back into to opiates again. That was my solution. And because early on in my youth and with baseball, I never found a solution internally. I always found solutions outside of myself. So especially with alcohol and all these other things, I needed something for something with Adderall. I needed something to help me, a solution outside of me. Because me was never good enough. And so um, alcohol was my solution for being social and partying and girls, and Adderall was my solution for focusing in baseball, and then opiates became my solution for being alone and my pain, and I think and one of the big things in my life now, how I live in the solution, is managing my pain, right? And I have all these side effects that I deal with. So what happened was the chemotherapy and radiation that they gave me was so nasty that it completely wrecked my nervous system. uh for years, I have this like buzzing all over my body, and then I have this intense peripheral neuropathy. It's called, at the end of your fingertips and your toes, and where I lost. I had hypersensitivity, where it's like pins and needles. You're feeling like really really intense, and at the same time numbness, where I had no feeling in the muscles of my shins. So like your jumping muscles, your anterior tibialis, where you think about like when you walk, lift your ankle up till you walk and run. I had no feeling in that muscle, so I was just falling down. I just like went from like basically a pro athlete to decrepit overnight, and yeah, it was humbling, I mean, but again, in my recovery, I thought that, and this is an important thing to say, especially for your audience, especially for parents, is that there's culpability in my brain tumor, right? In my desperation to come back from my arm, I ran out of options. I ran out of I was willing to die at 40 to play 10 years in the major leagues. That was my mindset. Right. And when my arm was broken and doctors told me that I could never throw right again, I didn't know how to hear that. And what it did was it blurred lines in the sands that I thought that I would never cross. Right. I never thought that I would do steroids or human growth hormone. With the stigma around baseball, I never thought that I would do that. But in my desperation to fix my arm, I didn't have any other options. And so I went out and I bought human growth hormone and other anabolic steroids from a very shady source, and I misused it without any medical supervision, without any knowledge, without any, and that's what ultimately gave me my brain tumor, right? So there's culpability. My actions and choices and these things, they caused these things. So it wasn't life that dealt me that hand. I dealt it to myself, and as sad as that is, I'm okay with that now, because it ended up being the biggest gift that I ever got. Right. But my point is that when I was at that moment of weakness where I didn't know what else to do, I didn't have people around me that told me, hey, this is probably not a good idea. You don't know what you're doing. There could be long-term effects. I didn't know that I had history in my family of brain tumors with children, because the type of tumor that I had was so rare in adults. It happens to less than 100 adults in the world a year. So rare. So I had no point of reference on how to fix my side effects. I had no point of reference on how to do anything. I was basically just I was on my own. But it happens mostly in children, and that's why we do all the work now at the Children's Hospital with my dog. But I'll get into that later. But yeah, it happens mostly in children, and so I had no person in my life that told me, hey, you should, this is probably not a good idea for you to do it. Instead, what I had was my coaches and people that helped me fund getting it. You know, that told me that because it was in their best interest for me, because they didn't know how to help me. They didn't know what to say. But it was in their best interest for me to make it to the major league. So they were willing to be as desperate as I was. And those are the people that I surrounded myself with, and it hurt me because I thought I loved them and I thought they were a part of my family. But I had to hide from my family that stuff, because my family would have said life's bigger than baseball. You don't need to do that stuff. You don't know what's going to do to you. And so those are the people that I chose to be around, and that's such an important message, because I needed somebody to say no. Like, just, you need to think about. I needed somebody in my weakest moment. You know, I'm 22 years old. My weakest moment. You know, that there's life beyond it, and that's when, you know, when I learned the people that I idolized, you know, are just human too. You know, and I don't think it was their intention to like hurt me or anything. I think that they got caught up in how good I was, and how this whole event and thing, and I think they didn't know how to help me. But it's a sad story, and it was really hard for me to come to terms with that when I first realized that. But I'm grateful for it now, though.